Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video. Here we are. This is a Q&A. So this is all about you and your questions. And you're here because you are the people that support us. You're the people who make it possible for us to keep going. And we appreciate that ever so much. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for giving us the support that you give us. So I'm ready to answer your questions.
First person with her hand up was Yolanda. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. So my question is, when we make decisions in this virtual reality, does the LCS with all of its future possibilities and probabilities sort of intend to nudge us, being the avatar, into making the best choice? Is there such a thing as an optimal choice in the interests of efficiency and lowering entropy? If this is the case, and our quality of consciousness were kind of sort of one with the LCS, could it feel like our life is predetermined, kind of like a movie we've seen before in play?
Yes, all of those things are possible. Indeed, there is usually a best choice, but we don't always know what it is. Sometimes it's outside of our reach and understanding. That best choice is always the choice that is the low entropy choice for not only for yourself, but for everybody associated with you, for everyone that you affect. So it's the low entropy choice for the system. And if you are a person of interest, and I'm sure everybody here is one of those persons of interest to the larger consciousness system, that is somebody that's actually trying to grow up, trying to get rid of their fear, trying to evolve the quality of their consciousness. If you're engaged in this growing up process, in this evolutionary process, then you're a person of interest for the system. And yes, indeed, it will give you nudges. It will give you hints. It'll give you synchronicities. And it may even nudge you in ways that makes it seem like your life is pre-planned or already scripted, to the point that things can be predicted years in advance, and they happen just like you're told. So it's not because this is a deterministic reality, but just because that we have paths that are more productive. Some paths are more productive than others. And as a person of interest, you're helped down that path that is going to be most productive for you. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the path full of happiness and smiles. Sometimes being productive means dealing with very difficult things. Very difficult choices also carry very large growth potential. Very simple and easy choices carry very small or carry smaller growth potential. So sometimes that leading us on that path to optimal growth can be a tough path, but it's a path that gives us maximum opportunity to grow and to evolve the quality of our consciousness. So indeed, my life fits that pattern pretty well. I've had all kinds of things predicted in my life that happened, decades into the future, exactly as they were predicted. A lot of that's just nudging and planning on the system's part. And yes, we all have free will, and that makes planning difficult. If it was just a plan, that plan would be very difficult to actually make happen if you didn't have the LCS doing the nudging at the top level, kind of encouraging you to be at the right place at the right time. So that's kind of the key ingredient. So yes, Yolanda, yes, yes, and yes for your kind of string of questions there. That is the way that it works. Now, the more you become a person of interest, the more serious you are at evolving, the more you're actually reducing your fear, then the more this is true. So if you have people who really have no idea they're evolving their consciousness, they have no idea that their choices are affecting their evolution, they're just going through life kind of, completely unaware of things. They may not get many nudges. They may never experience synchronicities. To them, all this sounds silly, like hocus pocus, because if you're not a person of interest, because you're not really working on it, then you don't get enough nudges consistently to probably notice them. And you believe that, you're all alone. You don't notice any nudges. And the more you succeed, the more you're aware of the help and the nudges that you get. So not everybody gets those kinds of nudges and has that kind of an experience. Some people do not. Mostly it's because they don't recognize it, because the system may not have them as people of interest, but it still tries to help them. But typically they're just not much, they're not too aware of that sort of thing.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Lane, please go ahead.
Well, first I want to say thank you to Donna, Keith, and Tom for just doing this in general. I know that it's probably a lot of effort and work to continuously just keep this up and organize and plan all these things out. So I just wanted to thank you guys for putting so much of large effort in your free time to just get this going. So thank you guys. So my question kind of has like a little bit of a background story to begin with. So I'm going to kind of keep it simple, just to kind of like frame the question I'm going to ask. But so growing up, me and my two brothers were really into meditating and trying to have like astral projection, out of body experiences after reading Robert Monroe's books. So we've always been really interested in these type of things and kind of experimenting and kind of figuring out what consciousness is like capable of doing. But one thing that's really interesting is within this last year, something kind of big happened to like my family where, so two people in my family who are normally the most like closed-minded, kind of hard-headed people ended up having experiences connecting and communicating with entities that kind of have shared information that definitely correlates to how like MBT works. And so I won't get into like too deep of details with that, but my dad has kind of become has been kind of trained with communicating with these beings through meditation, and they have taught him to be able to not only just like interpret like imagery into like information, but now he has like kind of like an open communication, what some people would kind of consider channeling or whatever term people would use for that. But one thing that's really interesting, it's something that keeps continuously getting brought up more recently with this, is that that each individual kind of has like a being that's associated with them, that's been through like multiple past lives. And one thing that's really interesting is it kind of has a close and similarity to the individual's personality type. So kind of like what someone would say as your higher self or higher being, but it seems to have a separate identity at the same time. And asking these beings questions and kind of getting answers through over the last like few months, it seems like the way they describe it is these beings were with us in past lives, and some people, they switch off living a life and helping the other one being their being and rotating back and forth on that process. And I guess my question along with this is like, how does that kind of fit into like MBT, or if there's like any experiences that maybe you've had, Tom, that kind of relate to that process? Because that's something that I wasn't really too familiar with, is the idea that like potentially we could have these beings that are helping us do the nudging, that are connected to the LCS, that are kind of in the higher chain of command in that process that we might not be able to see or view. if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I would put it a little differently, but anyway, it'll hopefully this will answer your question. If a person's evolution of their evolution of their own consciousness would be helped or would be improved by having communications with non-physical entities, then non-physical entities are going to be available because that's something that would be helpful to them, something that helps them interact, open their mind, make a personal connection with the larger consciousness system. So the larger consciousness system has that as an available, we say, it's an available feature of the system that you can talk to it, you can connect with it, and it will connect with you in any way that makes the most sense to you. Okay, so we call these guides often. We have guides. Well, your guide is really just your personal interface with the larger consciousness system. Okay, now that interface is personal. It has sense of humor, it has personality, it has attitude. It is your personal interface. So it's a being, but it's really, you're talking to the LCS. It's not that there are separate IUOCs out there whose job it is to follow us around and chat with us when we want to chat. That's very inefficient of their time, to do that. The time that we might spend chatting to our guide might not be more than a few minutes a day. Well, to have some being hanging out, for those few minutes a day and doing that is not really the best use of their time as far as their own evolution goes. Now, it is good to help, and helping is good, is a good thing to do and does help you improve, but it's just inefficient. So what happens is the system just gives you a connection to it. It gives that connection a personal interface, and it works with you. Now, when you ask questions like, well, who are you and why are you answering my questions and how do I relate to you? It will often give you a story that makes sense to you, that kind of makes it all sound credible. And I think the story your dad got was, oh, well, we've been doing this with each other for a very long time. And, this is my turn, to be helping you out. And you help me out some other times. Well, that's not necessarily factual, but it kind of captures in a metaphor the way it is. Yes, they have been doing that all along. That's true. You've had interfaces with the system through most of your incarnations. Whether you're aware of it or not, it's there. And it is an interface that is, it's not like the interface changes every time. The interface becomes your friend, becomes that person that you're talking to. So you'll sometimes get those kinds of answers, not because the system is, telling you lies so much as that's how you interpret it, because that's what makes sense to you. The system will tell you, yes, this is the thing that we do and we interact, and I'm trying to be of service or help to you. And, as part of your growth, you will be more help and service to others as you grow up. And we get that and we kind of turn it into something that makes sense to us, which is, oh, we take turns and we've done this for a long time. Well, yeah, sort of, but not exactly, you see. So that's how that works. Now, it's not a problem to, to have that image that, oh, this is another entity and we take turns doing that. It's not like that ruins something. That's fine. Let that be. I would never tell anybody, oh, no, that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just the way that they are interpreting what's going on. And it's a perfectly good way to interpret it. But yes, that does work. The system is available to us as we get aware enough to interact with it directly. It's actually aware of us and interacting with us even when we're not aware enough to interact with it directly. We don't notice it so much then. Then it's just that little voice in our head that sometimes talks to us that we often call our intuition. But once you get past a certain point of your evolution, that can become a relationship with an individual, not just a little voice in your head. So yes, those things are just what they seem to be. But to make the process more efficient, you're really talking to the LCS. Matter of fact, that's the best way to say it, because if we say anything else, if we try to make another layer, say, oh, well, you have the LCS and then you have this layer of beings that talk to people. That's their job. It's sort of like the call center, you know, and you make relationships. Now you've created another whole set of things in consciousness. And it's just, in my way of thinking, that's not such a good thing to do. Better to just keep it simple without creating things like that that aren't so much realistic as they are metaphors that help us understand the situation, rather than, you know, so they're not necessarily literally true. They're just figuratively true. Well, anyway, so that's kind of the thing about, yes, this does take place. Yes, it's real. Yes, the information is good. But remember, any information that you get or your dad gets, it's his interpretation of the data stream that he received. So it's going to be colored by his own limitations, his own beliefs, his own fears, you know, his own knowledge, his own lack of knowledge, whatever. It's going to come across to him, and however he can interpret it in terms of his own database. And that's something to be cautious of or be aware of, whether you read somebody's channeling work, you know, or whether it's guides or any other communication with the larger system. You're really getting the interpretation of that individual, and you're getting all the limitations that that individual has, you know, along with it. So you tend to just pick up the big ideas and let the details go. The details aren't important.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Yeah, I completely agree when it comes to looking for the meaning of something versus the specifics. We're trying to be very cautious on the way he interprets things, the way he explains things, without, you know, like religion getting in the way or some other people's biases. But one thing that's really interesting that's kind of happening within that same situation is he's able to like communicate and see other people's, and watching them interact with each other. So that's like the kind of part that's kind of different, you know, because it seems like there are these separate identities of something, when even though they could, you know, just be a larger part of the whole system in general. But it's just really interesting is all.
Well, if he breaks it out into a pattern of some sort, then that's his, you know, that's his metaphor for what's going on. Okay. We tend to think in terms of metaphors. That's the way we are. We think in terms of metaphors. So you'll have to take these structures or organizations or whatever it is, take them more as metaphors for the fact that there is interaction. There is interaction going there. Now, exactly how that interaction is structured is more the person's interpretation than anything else. So that structure isn't fundamental. That structure is just helps the individual, like your father, helps him make sense of it. It helps him build up a kind of a story to support it. Otherwise, everything is just abstract. And we don't deal well with abstractions. When we're dealing in an abstract space, we tend to start making structures up in order to help us think about it, talk about it, interact with it. And we don't realize that we're mostly making those structures up. It's not that the structure has to be there, but that the structure is of our own creation. And in my model, I've done the same thing. The larger consciousness system, the IUOCs, the free will awareness units, all these things are metaphors. It doesn't mean that there's this, thing out there just like that, and it's got these sub pieces. That's not the point. That's kind of irrelevant. The point is, there is source, and I call that the larger consciousness system, and there is us, and I call that the IUOCs, and there's that part of us that's logged on here, and I call that the free will awareness unit. But these are all metaphors for functions in consciousness that I've experienced and that are part of my list of facts about consciousness. But the structure I give it is all metaphorical. So it's not just that I'm saying, oh yeah, well, your father's not there yet, so his are just metaphors, but others aren't. No, it's all like that. That's how we think. That's how we get things and take something totally abstract and bring it down to something we can talk about, is we make up metaphors. So again, don't take the details too seriously. Take the big picture more seriously, but let the organization and the details of the structure and so on just be metaphors for helping somebody understand it and explain it to others. And in a way, that's often a problem, because people make up metaphors and then they begin to believe the metaphor, and then their belief in the metaphor becomes the right way and the only way, and everybody else then is wrong. And that creates a lot of problems. So it's much better if we understand that the structures in which we put things are our own metaphors to help us understand it, not necessarily literally true.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll definitely keep that in mind and kind of relay that information out to that. I don't want to ask too many questions or jumping back and forth on this, but one more thing is, like, the consciousness system, is it trying to find the most efficient way for us to subjectively explain like how this works? So like your process for MBT, your interpretation of how you're building out that model out, and then how someone like my dad could be having his own subjective experience that's completely different and trying to explain that. Is the system, is that its goal, is to kind of create a more efficient way for us to build that out?
No, I would say no. The system will support building that out, no matter what form it's in, even if it's in a very complex form. It's not about getting the right or the most efficient or the most accurate model. That's not the point. The point is, does it help people grow up? Does it help them feel like they're a part of something bigger? Does it help them see bigger pictures, live in a bigger picture? And if it does, then it's good, and the system supports it. The system isn't interested in whether or not you've got the right answer. It's interested in whether or not your answer is helping you grow, whatever an answer it is that you get. So it's not that we have to work toward a particular toe. And that's why in my books, I'm always telling people to, they have to make their own big toe. Don't just copy and believe my big toe. That's not going to be helpful. Make your own big toe. And it doesn't have to be like mine. All it has to be is, it has to be according to your own experience. And that's much better than copying mine. Now, if you like mine and that works for you, well, that's okay too. You can use that, but feel free to make your own big toe, because in as much as you do that, it all leads to the same place, which is growing up, learning, you see. So it supports all sorts of big toes or all sorts of, schema. And it's not that, oh, this one's more right than the others. Now mine, I tried to reduce it to the simplest set possible, because that's better science. If you don't add to it, you don't add flourishes here and little embellishments there and whatever, just try to keep it as simple as possible and straightforward as possible. So My big toe tends to be that way because I'm a scientist and I'm trying to create science here, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And all those embellishments and things that might be on it, they may not be fundamental, but if they help you see it, if it helps make it concrete in your own mind, then they're good. They're helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom.
Arthur, please go ahead. I just have to let you know, Tom, that Arthur is the one who swam with the turtles.
Oh,
Okay, hello, Tom. First, I want to thank you and your team so much for your great work. I want to tell you about an experience I had within an imagination in Tom's Park, your new book. And then I have a question to this imagination, which I can't explain myself. So, one evening, I was very tired, but I wanted to test an imagination in Tom's Park. I read just to page 45. And suddenly I had the idea to go asleep in Tom's Park. Lying in my bed, I began the imagination and went into the kiosk at the beach. I wished to go out with a blue and white striped swim dress. When I went out from the kiosk, I just wore this dress, but I had to laugh so much because I also wore swim pants, swim glasses, a snorkel, and a funny swim helmet in form of a rubber duck. Now I went to the beach, put off the funny things, and laid down in the warm, fine sand to sleep. I heard the waves, all was fine. Suddenly I saw a big turtle coming from the sea to me. The turtle was about 3 feet and lay down on me, stroked me lovely with her feet and her nose. It was wonderful, and I wished more turtles to come. And suddenly another turtle about 2.5 feet big, and many little turtles came to me. Lay down on me, put warm sand on us. It was so lovely and wonderful that I had some tears in my eyes and also had a warm feeling in my heart. And so I felt asleep. It was really great. Now my question, Tom, if imagination in Tom's Park is a single player game, how can it be that it is so real as if there were real turtles, real entities with feelings and interacting? It felt different than in a single player dream because I didn't sleep when interacting with these turtles. Could you explain this to me, Tom?
well, it is real, Arthur. What happens is that you start with your imagination, but then you stop actually constructing the story yourself. You just let the story unfold however it does. What that means is that when you make that transition between purposefully making a story and letting a story happen, you make a transition to a virtual reality. So now you're just letting it happen. You're just getting a data stream and interpreting it. That's the same as being out of body or just in some other reality frame. So it is real. That reality frame, that virtual reality, is no less real than this virtual reality. All virtual realities are equally real. The choices you make in any virtual reality will help you evolve or de-evolve. So when I say they're real, I mean they're functional. They work the same way wherever you are. So the choices you make, the things you feel, the connections that you generate, they are as real and as important and as significant in any virtual reality as they are in any other. So we think that this physical thing we call our physical universe, that physical reality is somehow the real reality and everything else is kind of a fake reality, something we make up. But that's not the case. This physical universe is a virtual reality, just like the one that you were in with the turtles or the ones you get in when you dream. And it's just as real, just as important, and just as significant. So you can make friends with the staff in Tom's Park, and you can have relationships with those staff members that are just as important and significant as the relationships you have here with people in this virtual reality, or the relationships you have with, say, your guides that we talked about with the first question. So a virtual reality is information. It's information that comes to you, and you get to interact with that information, and you make choices, and you have feelings, and you make, there's relationship, there's connection, and it's all real. So it's not that the thing with the turtles wasn't real. It was just as real as things here. Matter of fact, it's different in a way that you don't experience here, because in these other realities, often they're not so complicated. This reality that we call our physical universe has lots and lots of layers of complication going on it all the time. So it's real difficult just to sort out a very, a single connection and follow that, because everything's so entwined with so many other things. Whereas in that relationship with the turtles, it was simple, straightforward, clear, and calm. It wasn't wrapped up with 100 other things going on all at the same time, in a way that sometimes makes it seem even more real, because it's more present and you're more fully connected to it. So sometimes people feel like these other virtual realities are more real than the physical reality. Well, they aren't really. It's just that they're less complicated. They're less connected. So it's more of a kind of a pure distillation of that experience, as opposed to that experience being mixed in with a lot of other things, like it would be that if you had an experience like that here. So it is a real experience, just as real as any other. And you should treasure it just like you would treasure a wonderful experience here. It's just a really nice experience. You feel that love, you feel that caring, you feel that taken care of, you feel that sense of belonging and nurturing, and it's something to keep, something to treasure. It's real. So that's the whole point of Tom's Park, is that you begin to learn to let go of that control of the imaginative story. You start with an imaginative story, but then when you let the control of that go and let that story run on its own, you're not imagining it anymore. You're getting a data stream from the system. You're now, and you can say, well, that's a out of body, or give it some other name, but the name's irrelevant. You've just teleported to some other reality frame, and you're having a different experience there than you could have here. And treasure all of them, because the choices you make in any of them are just as valuable as any others. So don't think of that this is the real reality and these other realities are somehow fake, even though they seem real. They're just as real as this one.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This makes sense to me. And it was really so real, a feeling I can't explain. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Arthur. I will always remember that story as one of my favorite. Chris, please go ahead.
Hi, Donna. Hi, Tom. Okay, so hypothetical situation. I'm in let's say, a natural park. There's not another human being for hundreds of miles around. And let's say I'm in a forest, and I look up and I see a deer. So my question is, was that deer born? Did it live a whole life and then get to that point? Or was it rendered instantaneously for the first time when I looked up, based on, a random draw from the probability that a deer would be there in that forest?
That deer was just put into your data stream and rendered there for that experience. Okay. But now, if you decided to dig up information about that deer, if you could track that deer, if you could look at that deer's DNA and see, you know, what were its parents like and so on, you could create a backstory for it because all of that information would be there. So then you would think that, well, okay, it was born there, it had parents there. Let's see, I can look at the contents of the stomach and muscle tissue, and I can see the kind of diet it had and what it ate, and maybe even tell you what the last meal was. And you could do that, which would create a backstory. But that's only because now that you want that information, the system fills in that information also by a random draw from the probability distribution of the possibilities. But to begin with, that deer's just there, rendered for you to interact with it however you do. If you're not interested in the backstory, then the backstory never becomes apparent. So the backstory is only there when you look for it, when you demand that information. If you don't demand it, it's not there. So yes, that deer's just put there in your information stream.
Okay, so that would kind of say that the only beings that are being sort of played constantly are human beings.
Well, not necessarily. It depends on what you mean by being played, I guess. Okay, I'm trying to understand exactly what your question was. But all right, you mean the only ones that are being
well, that are continuously receiving sense data, that are continuously making choices and having a continuous experience, rather than being rendered on the spot because someone was looking at it. Or
well, this is a virtual reality meant for the evolution of conscious entities. Now, we can look at it from the viewpoint that we are the we look at ourselves as the cream of the cream, right?
like sort of apex consciousness.
Yeah, the apex consciousness. You know, we kind of look at ourselves that way. But there's lots of conscious beings. That deer is also a conscious being. And if you interact with it, you'll see that it also is making choices. You know, the choice to stay and interact with you, the choice to run, whatever. It has choices to make. And we could say that by its choices, it's actually growing up and evolving the quality of its consciousness as well. So we could say that, but we don't really have any, that makes a good story for us. It makes us and all the other consciousness kind of be on the same footing, just different consciousness. But basically, our own story is that we are getting this data stream, and this data stream involves the deer. Now, could we say that the deer is also getting the data stream, and that data stream now involves you?
Yeah, that's kind of the gist of the question. Is did like when I say did that deer, was it born at some stage? Did it go? Let's say it's a 10-year-old deer. I don't know how many years deers live for, but let's say it's a 10-year-old deer. Has it had 10 years of data stream? Has it been making its own animal level choices for 10 years, or maybe it starts to receive data the instant I look there, because all of a sudden it comes into being. It's rendered by the system for the first time, and now it starts receiving data and starts acting on its instincts, etc. I suppose that's my question. I guess is I'm trying to work out how far down the the food chain, so to speak, consciousness goes. Because if it goes,
I can give you my opinion, but there is no definitive fact. Like this is the way it is, because it could be either way. We wouldn't know. Let's put it that way. Okay. If it was done that the deer just was there because you were there and you're the apex consciousness and it's just all about, your consciousness, then that could be true in the sense that you wouldn't notice it. There's nothing in there that would allow you, a fact to prove it one way or another. So in that
Okay.
sense, we have to allow that as a possibility. My own opinion of it, though, since there are no hard facts, because this is a thing that wouldn't show, is that the deer indeed is treated the same way we are. That the deer is indeed, born, has 10 years worth of experiences that make it more or less skittish, and that it is evolving its consciousness just like we're evolving our consciousness, so that the system keeps track of everything that's conscious, and all of those choices and all of those things are getting data streams, so that every player includes, players include the deer, as well as includes us, as well as includes, bumblebees and all sorts of things. Now, the level, the amount of effort that it takes the system to feed data streams to a bumblebee as opposed to a human is vastly different. So the system wouldn't be, wouldn't have as much work to do to feed data streams to a consciousness that was very limited in its scope and its ability to make choices. That would be a very simple thing to do, whereas a human would be a lot more complicated because there's a lot more interaction going on. So everyone wouldn't get the same amount of attention.
Yeah, bandwidth.
The same amount of bandwidth. It would be very different. But I think all conscious things here have a backstory and make choices. And by those choices, they tend to evolve or de-evolve. So where, you might run into nice deer and not so nice deer, nice dogs and not so nice dogs because of the history that they have. And they're trying to evolve their quality of consciousness, as do we. They're just doing it with a smaller bandwidth and within a much less set of possibilities, a smaller decision space. So that's just my opinion. But I think if we look at it logically, there's no way to logically prove one way or another.
Sure, and I suppose it doesn't really matter either one way or another, but it's just sort of curiosity, really.
Exactly. It doesn't really matter one way or another. So we just kind of let that go. It is however it is. Living gracefully with uncertainty.
Fair enough.
Are the NPCs, the non-player characters, permanently assigned to the park, and do they have the free will of the LCS?
Well, are they assigned to the park? Yes, I guess that would be a fair thing to say. It's a good metaphor. They're assigned to the park, and yes, they do make their own choices. They have the free will of the LCS, just like Uncle Fred does. We go talk to our dead Uncle Fred. He can also exercise free will, but it's the free will of the larger consciousness system. And that's true of all of us. That's where my free will comes from too. My free will is the free will really of the larger consciousness system. I'm a piece of that system. So all of these characters are also pieces of that system.
All right, Susan, go ahead.
Okay, good. First of all, I want to say that there are not only giant turtles at Lake Love, but there are also dolphins. And I've been swimming with the dolphins and it's fantastic. And there's actually a portal between Lake Love and the ocean. So really interesting creatures can come and go whenever they want. Just FYI. Okay, so what is the logic? Here's my question. What is the logic supporting the existence of IUOCs? Why not just a bunch of free will awareness units? The IUOC would make sense if free will awareness units were able to pool their resources and take advantage of the quality gained by the whole group. But since we only get to keep what we individually earn, not what the entire IUOC earns and understands, then I can't understand the function of the IUOC in the system, this metaphorical system.
Okay, well, that's a good question. The function of the IUOC is to be the accumulator of the experience. So you as a an individuated unit of consciousness, you have many lifetimes, many experiences, and these experiences have to be such that they start with no intellectual background. In other words, each experience has to start off fresh so that you're making fresh choices. Otherwise, you'd be constantly gaming the system. Oh, I think this is the answer I should give. I should be like this. And pretty soon everybody would be acting their way through the process because they know what they should be doing. And that would make a lot of good actors, but it wouldn't necessarily make anybody grow up very much. So you start fresh with no intellectual baggage. So you're not bringing any old fears, old experiences, old relationships. You just start fresh and you get to now interact and make choices as you do, as is natural for you, the person that you are, the consciousness that you are. Okay, and that's exactly what the system wants. But we also have to have a function that is the accumulator of all of these experiences. So because the free will awareness unit doesn't come in with prior knowledge, it just comes in fresh each time, which is necessary, then we have to have the accumulator that can take all of these experiences and learn from the conglomerate, learn from all of them together and say, well, okay, I see a trend here. You know, I can see in the last 20 experiences that I've been struggling with this problem. So I need to work on that more consciously, more effort to try to work on that problem. So that's the role of the IUOC is of the overseer, the accumulator, the one that does analysis over all the lifetimes. So that's why I have that breakout between those two functions. That allows the free will awareness unit to start fresh and be honest, to be authentic each time, rather than carrying baggage and ways that it thinks it should act over from the last time. It just has to be authentic who it is, because it doesn't know anything else other than who it is. So that enforces authenticity of that function. So that's why we need both of those and don't have just one. Now, I should also say that when I made up my model, I basically looked at these various functions of consciousness and then gave them names. And the IUC was that piece of the larger system, that's the accumulator. It's the bigger package, and then the free will awareness is the part that's logged on to the avatar. And there isn't anything, again, these are metaphors. Don't take them too seriously, because sometimes people said, well, while the free will awareness unit is having all that experience, what's the IUC doing? Is it just kind of, what's it up to? Does it hang out with other IUOCs and talk about, their free will awareness units and how they're working, or what does it do? And my answer to that is you're pushing the metaphor too far. The metaphor doesn't really go there and talk about that. It just says you need an IUOC to be the accumulator. You need a free will awareness unit to be the actor, the authentic actor without the background. And that's it. As far as what the IUOC does all day at the office, while its free will awareness unit is working, well, just don't go there. That's not really part of the theory. Now, some people would say, well, that IUOC then is obviously our higher self. And they will give that the position of higher self. And I communicate with my higher self and so on. Well, they communicate with something outside of them. Yes, whether you call that a guide or a higher self or the LCS, doesn't really matter. You communicate with things out there. So if you want to call that a higher self, that's fine, but it's not necessary. You see, it could be a guide, it could be the system. So I only like to make my pieces of my model, those things that are necessary functions that have to exist in consciousness.
Right.
But I don't really, I can't answer the question, what does the IUC do all day while the free will awareness unit's at work? Because that's That's not where I
Not
go
the
with
right
the model.
question.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not the right question. I don't know what the IUC does all day. The IUOC is just there as the accumulator, as the subset of the larger consciousness system.
Okay, yeah, that all makes perfect sense. I guess my misunderstanding is that the IUOC can break off several parts and create players. But do we get to accumulate? Do we get everything that all the players learn? And what if one of them does a really bad job? And we want to say, hey, I mean, do you see my? If the IUOC was just reserved for a single free will awareness unit, then all that makes sense. But if several players can be playing the IUOC at any one time, then it means that I'm collecting, I'm either evolving or de-evolving, but it's not me who's doing it, it's other players. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. A single IUOC can produce more than one free will awareness unit. So an IUOC can partition off a part of itself and say, all right, this part just has my quality, doesn't have my background, doesn't have my intellect, go get an avatar. And it can then proportion off another part of itself and do the same thing. So it can have multiple players engaged in experience packets at the same time. And that's not a problem because they both will evolve or de-evolve, and both represent the IUOC at its current level of growth and understanding. So, that's just doing a little parallel processing. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes in special cases. So that shouldn't be a problem. So what is it that is the problem?
I guess I worry that there are free will awareness units out there that are doing a bad job and bringing our whole IUOC down a little bit.
Yeah, that happens if they happen to make poor choices. Although this growth path is cumulative, so your probability of making poor choices gets smaller and smaller the more you grow. It gets bigger and bigger the less you grow. So, but any particular instance of you, any free will awareness unit that you spawn has the potential to evolve or de-evolve because it has free will. That's necessary because of free will. If you say, well, you have free will, but you're only free to do what I want you to do. You're only free to evolve. If you de-evolve, I cut off your free will. You can't do that. You have to say, all right, it starts with the level of quality that I have now. Now, it can make poor choices. And if it makes poor choices, indeed, that will be a decrement. You will de-evolve a little bit. But now let's say you've had, let's say 5,000, 10,000 life experiences. And now you have a free will awareness unit that gets in with the wrong company and makes some really poor choices and doesn't do well. Well, what's that going to do to you as an IUOC? Not much. That's just 1 out of 10,000. And all right, it didn't do so well. So, you still have that potential, that capacity to make poor choices. Well, now you just keep working on it. But because you're pretty well developed consciousness, the probability is going to be that your free will awareness units are going to do pretty well because they got a basic understanding that's at your level of consciousness. So it's okay that occasionally things don't work out well. That's not a big problem. It's not like that brings the whole thing down. That's just one decrement. Yes, the whole thing maybe does slip just a little bit because of that, but nothing that you can't make back up again. You have to, free will requires you to have the possibility to go either way, to succeed or to fail.
Yeah, but if you're working really hard, you don't want to think that there's another part of you out there, messing things up.
Yeah, well, that's that's free will. There might be, you might mess things up yourself, for a while. That's just the way it is. So we all do the best we can. And that's just the living gracefully with uncertainty. There's no way to control away that uncertainty. We can make mistakes, we can evolve, but we'll just do better next time.